Okay, so I'm going to move fast. What I'm about to do, I do in literally in 2 full days in training on community development. So I'm going to throw stuff at you that probably needs a lot more explanation. And I also am a perspectives teacher. If you have never taken, how many have taken perspectives? Okay, well, I'm class 12, which is the community development piece. And so it'll be more along that line that we'll talk here, but I want to leave time for some questions and answers as well. So let me just go through it. Let me just do it this way. So, all right, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff that takes too long because that's the first. I want you to know that this stuff is biblical. Poverty. We're going to talk about poverty first. Family of 4 today that makes less than $32. $30,150 a year is considered poor in America. That's 11.1% of the nation, 36 million people. So poverty is hard to define, but basically the poor are still growing in numbers, but most of our ministry is around folks that are in poverty, not all, but some of them. Secondly, in the world, to be poor, if you make less than $3 a day, then you're considered poor. Again, these are people who are smarter than us that figure out how you define poverty. So obviously $3 a day is a lot poorer than what we do in America. And there are, what does it say, 700 million, 8.5% of the world in desperate poverty, real lowest to the low. There's a lot of categories of poverty we won't get into. Let me tell you about the Bible definition of poverty. If you read the Old Testament, you will discover that the Levitical law, which was really well done way of taking care of order. How do you do society as followers of Jehovah? And some of the rules we won't get into, but one of those was about poverty. So if you, as a father, awaken and your family does not have food that day, then the law allowed you to go to the home of a more wealthy person and tell him you needed food for your family. He would give that to you, obligated to do so that you could take it home right then so your family would eat that day. But you would leave your coat, your outer coat, most of them had 2 coats, the outer coat they would leave as escrow so that they would keep it, because a lot of times they would use that bigger coat at the time of the year as a blanket and pull that up and cover over. So that you wanted it back before night. So you go back after you deliver the food to your family to the owner, and you would work for him all day long. Pretty good system. Quick work, equity of all kinds. And at the end of the day, you go get your coat, go back home. So that system works. There's other places we've done. You look at Naomi and Ruth and their truths and how they did. God made provisions for the poor in special kinds of ways. When you read the prophets, you will discover that that was a great system, but as all systems are, they go awry. And the problem was that these guys that had loaned the money out and kept the coat, or immorality, these are in several of the prophetic books, where they would then go with father and son, the scripture says, into temples of prostitution and sleep on the coats of the poor and not give them back during the night. That's how bad things got. Well, I don't know what the prophetic side of you is, but you got to call that kind of stuff out. And so there's always a side of the church, the Christian community, that, we don't want to call things out. I don't want to embarrass people, or I don't want to act like I'm better. So I'm not sure how prophetic we are as a church anymore, but there's a lot of duplicity, a lot of things that happen that I think we've got to be more vocal about sometimes. Lovingly vocal, but when one person's got too much and another person has none, how do you deal with those systemic issues? So they're all over the church. We struggle with them because there's all kinds of churches, but we won't be into that as much. So who are the marginalized? This is the definition I'm going to use today. These are the persons who are denied involvement for whatever reason in mainstream economic, political, cultural, or social activities. They may be homeless, unemployed, disabled, mental or physical, an ex-offender, an addict in substance abuse, a person in prostitution, those who are gay, lesbian, transgender, and those from ethnic and religious backgrounds who are often outside social acceptance. The marginalized, by definition we're using, are those outside the system. So not only are we dealing with the poor, we're dealing with those who are marginalized. And we're not going to get into theology or ethics of who believes what. That's not what today's about. But I just want you to know that the church needs to learn how to love these folks well, and it's not easy for most of us. I want to talk about three now. Most of you know. Get my books real quick. How many here have a book called When Helping Hurts? Okay. Everybody ought to have one. I don't have one to give you, but I'm going to show you this to make sure you find one. Fickert and Colbert wrote this book. It's been 10 years out now. But what we think is helping people in poverty is Fickert will show you. They work at the Chalmers Institute. It's just their incredible organization. He deals with, he kind of breaks it down so that you can, instead of feeling guilty you didn't give the guy on the corner money, or if you did give it to him, not knowing what he did with that. They deal with the real issues of this. So some of it's theological, some of it's very practical. But the presupposition of the book is what you think is helping is really not, or may not necessarily be. But that's really, it's good to hear that because we feel guilty all the time if there's people around, and he will help you deal with it. Now, I'm not going to get close. I'm going to give you a few things about it, but there's so much more. So I would encourage you to get this book. There are other books they've done together that are also worthy of this. In fact, one of the things I think is interesting, those of you that take out-of-country trips, what to do, how do you get ready to take people on short-term mission trips? It's a whole little book that they've written because so many short-term mission trips that we know important. We're going to go help the people in Haiti or whatever it is. Our hearts are good. He will call out some of the challenges that we need to rethink, and the training that you should do before you go on a trip, the processing you need to do when you get back from a trip, because so much of what we do, we've been going to Mexico City for 50 years. If you just go down and feel sorry for poor people and take pictures of them, you didn't do missions. And then we come home, and because we've been doing this so long, thousands of people have gone with us, then you think, what really changed? Did they become donors? Well, when you track this, Fickert will talk about this, not really. You know, if we'd have done a better job, shouldn't they support? If we go to the orphanage in Mexico City and work with the homeless, and you track the Baylor kids that go with us, their hearts are broken. They cry. There's a real important piece of sadness when you face to face with the global poverty and lostness. But reality is, not many of them will go back. Now, they have a soft heart. They'll still tell the stories. So I'm not going to get into many details as I wish I could. So here's the basic presuppositions of how we tend to look at poverty. Number one, they will say that there's a difference between relief, rehab, and development. The average person, you say, why are people poor? Here's 4 reasons. All are true at some level. One is the lack of knowledge. Poor people that don't have education, they don't know how to manipulate the systems, they end up in the poorest jobs, usually not even jobs that people are paying taxes on, and people take advantage of that. And so people say, we just need to help those kids and they're doing poorly in school. Yes, you do. That is important. We're not denying that at all. The kid we have a school in my neighborhood that's a historically poor neighborhood where the kids are acting out and the school's performance level is really low, but that kid may be dyslexic and there's not preparation or enough adequate help. And so how do you help kids when they're young enough so they're not as poor, or at least not maybe not poor at all? So some people say, well, they just need more education, they won't be poor. That's partially true. The second is the system. And I certainly understand this, but the longer I worked, I've been doing Mission Waco for, we did it 38 years for me, but we've been in a poor neighborhood for 47 years. Like most people getting in the middle of this, it's bleary-eyed. You think you're going to help those poor people, and I'll tell you how we got there. But basically, we had to learn and grow up a lot. So this area is particularly problematic. So quick part of our story, grew up middle-class church, came to Baylor, and for those of you that have anything to do with Baylor, $25 an hour was tuition back then. But we won 4 football games in 4 years. So you get what you pay for. And so we won 11 one year. But I came to Baylor and became involved in the church. Andrew! Glad you're here, buddy. got involved in a local church and had to do a ministry guidance class, and did so, and then the youth director left, and they asked me to be the youth director. That's Highland Baptist Church. If you've been in Waco, it's now a huge church. I wish I could say it was because I was there. It was not. But this church is very strong, missional, every kind of way. But they, I asked because I needed a little more money, could I run the offset press? So one night, as I'm running the offset, 2 in the morning, I go over to cut the paper, and the paper cutter falls, and that's how I cut my finger off. So I have really different memories of Highland Baptist Church, but it's
I knew he did it.
it's my favorite. Huh? What do you say?
Nothing.
So anyway, Highland was important, but so the church was really critical. But I stayed there for 5 years. Pastoral change. Quick story: I ended up being asked to become the recreation supervisor of a children's home. I love people, love the poor. So I went out on my first day to the Waco State Home. These are what's called a DNN home, a home for dependent and neglected kids. And I had the keys to the gym and the swimming pool and all the rest. Kids 6 to 17 years old, taken away from their parents by the state. And I stopped to talk to a house parent because I couldn't find the gym. When I interrupted this kid, he cussed me out. 6-year-old kid, this filthy words started coming out of this kid's mouth. I thought, what is going on here? I thought, man, I may be out of my element. So got directions, went to the gym, opened the doors up, kids began to play basketball. In about 20 minutes, these two huge guys got into a fight, and I was supposed to stop it. It was the worst day of the worst week of my life. I mean, I could never have felt so hopeless. And I was mad at God. Now, you've got to understand, I'm a Pharisee by background. I have a 7-year Sunday school attendance pen that I didn't cuss. I didn't get drunk with the rest of the kids. I was the good kid, and now I'm getting cussed out and stopping fights and said, this is not my world. So I went out to Cameron Park that night and had a talk with God to remind him about my Sunday school pen. He didn't seem to care, and it was one of those times I just shut up long enough to hear the Spirit of God speak, and it was very powerful. Where it was like facing the duplicity of my life. I talk big about loving people, but how do you go love those kids? And I knew that they weren't going just because I'm coming out of the youth director, just because you do recreation. So I went back and on Monday, not really wanting to, but knowing it was the right thing, feeling called by God to do so. And I stayed 3 years. It changed my life. I fell in love with those kids. I began to realize the way to love them and mess with them and like them. That some, didn't always approve, but I stayed. The best news of that is my wife was a volunteer at the state home, and so we eventually got married, had that similar call together. So we went on to seminary, and while I was in seminary in Southwestern, I worked inner city. And again, this interesting dichotomy of in the morning we're talking theology and all this great stuff of the kingdom, but in the afternoon I'm working in public housing where kids are 14-year-old girls are getting pregnant and the crack cocaine and the hard stuff of the city, and how do these two get together? And where's the church? Because I had never been around churches that serve the poor, especially the hardcore. So those two jobs together began to reshape what came to be our call to the poor. Got out of seminary, went to Houston to work with Ralph Neighbor. If you know anything about Ralph, Ralph was a renegade, innovative guy that was doing cell groups long before cell groups were a thing. We went to Korea to study the cell group movement, largest church in the world, Young Cho's church in Seoul, Korea, 200,000 members still today, and amazing. But they found a way through small groups to love the poor, how to use the small groups to care, and they loved Jesus. And I mean, it was the spirit. It was one of those. I remember being in a home one day where we shared Christ with these Buddhist women, and they all wanted to become Christian. It's like, no, wait, that's too easy. You got to ask theological questions. Like they were ready, and the pastor kept saying, no, they understand. So it was a really powerful time to me to be reminded that I need to learn from the global Christians as well. So came back and did that for a while. Then Janet and I decided it was time to see the world. Fast forward, we sold our house there in Katy, Texas, made enough money to buy tickets around the world, and we had a 1-year-old child, 1.5, and so we found back then who was it? One of the airlines that's no longer around. We got on a plane and for the next 4.5 months went around the world. Went into the Eastern Bloc, the wall was still up, smuggled Bibles in, went to different nations, places, and ended up over time, just having our hearts broken. To see mamas holding babies that died in the night, to be in the people who didn't even know who Jesus was. The next to the last stop, almost the last stop, we stopped in Calcutta. And if you know anything about it, Calcutta is probably the hardest city in the world for us, and poor, millions of people, and that's where Mother Teresa worked. So we tried to find her, so we went back to, it's called Kalighat, in the back area in the red light district, and we went back and found the Sisters of Charity. Now, I'm Baptist, and we thought all Catholics were going to hell, so I had to kind of work on theology issues, and that was the way we all grew. So we went to watch these women, these incredible women, who every morning, they had 100 beds for men, 100 beds for women that were both dying. They were all coming out of the streets, and they would, every time somebody would die, the next morning they would go fill that bed with people mostly in the stations, train stations, and come back and bring 3 more, 5 more, whatever. So day in, day out, putting IVs in their arms, helping them out the best they could. We went to the leper slums. That was overwhelming. It's one thing to be in a slum in India, but when you add leprosy to that, another whole issue and thing. I won't go into the leprosy issues, but again, 4.5 months into the trip, we were worn out and decided we can't, we don't know what to do. So we said, well, let's just go back to Waco. Janet and I, some of our life was there. But we felt convicted we couldn't go back to middle class America. Once you've seen that much poverty, need, lostness, just to jump back into middle class America, and not only the living conditions, but the theology of kind of that, not care for the poor, but it's more tipping things. How do you really get in and make a difference? So we went to the other side. Waco's an old city, poor city, and it was very divided racially. Blacks were on one side of the river, whites and Hispanics in the south. So we began to look around, couldn't get a real estate agents to take us where we were looking for, and finally this one area of Waco that was called North Waco had become an all African American neighborhood. It had been white, old white housing, little smaller houses back then. Blacks had lived on the river. When King was marching, the world was changing. They would cross the river, and white flight happened. Everybody moved to the suburbs, and so 100% African American. We found our house. I live in a 4,000 square foot house. You think, you must be rich. Well, we bought it for $12,000. Location, location, location. It goes both ways. The house had become a slumlord house because the street had been, the bar across the street was called the Chat and Chew. Down on the other corner where Mission Waco is now, there was a boarded up building. There'd been a porno theater, crack dealers all over. The prostitutes, there were probably 15 girls that worked the streets, and the liquor store down there. Now, my father-in-law was already mad at me for taking the only child, the grandchild around the world for 4.5 months they couldn't see. You talk about an angry man to take this sweet little girl of mine, his daughter, and marry her and put that, go into that neighborhood. You got to understand, she was the driving force of that too. So we moved in and we bought the house. There was the guy driving had made it into this triplex, and so they had 2 veterans, mentally ill, living in one part, a kid upstairs, rats and roaches all over that part of the house. Downstairs was another lady we called the cat lady, who had 40 cats in a 1-bedroom apartment. It took about 3 years after we bought the house to get rid of the smell. So the house was in terrible shape, and so we went ahead and moved in, and I'm not a carpenter, you can tell. But we figured out the best things to do we could to survive it and live there. And through the years, people like Brian would come live with us. So I think we had 65 folks that lived with us, and a lot of them were Baylor students who they fell in love with wanting to work with the poor, but Mama wouldn't let them move in that part of town, and so they would find us and say, "Can you live there?" So we had great Baylor kids living with us, and the fun thing is getting old and watching Brian Berenkamp translate Bible in Nepal and gets it. And so we've had the joy of seeing the fruit of those relationships. So fast forward, everybody kind of, you want to track this. We brought some of them back, the youth group back. I was a youth director for 11 years. I really believe every pastor should be a youth director before they're a pastor. We're just so much more fun than boring pastors. So I've kept up with all those kids through the years. So when you get into working with the poor, though, you start realizing how many barriers there are to breaking the system. And $7.25 an hour, minimum wage. You multiply it out. You cannot live on $7.25 an hour and have a couple of kids, especially a single mom. So what Texas still is one of the few states that's still paying minimum wage at $7.25. Most states have moved to $15. We're still paying. So people say those people need to get a job. They've got a job. They've got 2 jobs in many cases. So systemic injustice is the blocks. Prison system. African Americans, if you want to have your world, watch the video 13, I think that's the name of it. The story of, political story of how the blacks became so dominant in the prison system today. It's just wrong in the way the politics happened. And you think, well, they did evil. No, the system was geared to take advantage of those who were poor and African American in many cases, or at least minority people. So everything we did began to run into these barriers, and through the years, I've always questioned my life choices, because I think at some point, should I have been on the advocacy side? Should I put on a tie, which I hate, to go to Austin and fight against the broken systems? And I think that is a good thing. Some people are called to that, and I love them when they do. I was on pastors for Texas schools for a while, and learning how to, what do you say to a congressman to help them realize we need to fund public schools better? A lot of those kind of issues, but there's lots of issues that I won't get into. Thirdly, the personal sins. They're poor because they sin. Yes, so do I. We're sinners. We mess up. We make bad choices. But you think, well, if they just quit smoking, if they just quit doing this, and so the simple answer for some people is they're just sinners. They need to get saved, and that's the only thing that's going to. It is true. They need to get to know the Lord. No question. We're not denying that. But that is not alone enough. You can still be, and some of my best friends are Christians who are very poor. So the faith they have is just always amazing. Then lastly, the lack of material possessions. If you just give them stuff, they'll get better. They won't be poor anymore. That is one of the worst things that we can do in so many ways. The people with the problem must be a part of the solution to the problem. So I'm going through in just a minute the 8 principles of some of the stuff that we believe is important. This is Maslow's hierarchy. How many had this class? Everybody had the class if you went to college. It's kind of a basic sociology 101. The majority of the poor are physiological down at the bottom. They're trying to survive. They come to Thankful Thursdays with Paul and Marguerite and Lee to eat, just get something. They're at the bottom of this. They're just hungry. They don't have a place to sleep. So it's basic human need. Okay? Well, once you get some of that met, then the next real issue is safety. If you are a family that lives in a poor neighborhood or a violent neighborhood, and your children are scared of daddy coming home and beating me again or whatever, not having safety psychologically messes you up over time. You know that. You've been around people that have had horrible backgrounds. So that's an issue we need to be talking about. I appreciate Bob Roberts talking about. This is not evangelism in the raw kind. This is of the broader sense of what we need to be doing. Next is belonging and loving, being loved. Everybody, you know, why do people get in gangs? It's not just to make money, it's because they accept them. I have a friend who went to prison for selling drugs to the Mexican mafia. And when he got out, guess who saw him at the gate when he got out? The same people that he'd been in with. The church wasn't there. The people weren't there. Those who had been part of his life. And so he wanted so badly to belong. It's very hard to break free from that. The church doesn't do well with marginalized people coming in who think, well, yeah, he's got a crime or he's got some reasons that we shouldn't, well, all my kids in that kind of church. And so we've really pushed back against some of the very things we should be doing. So the belonging piece, by the way, there's a group at Baylor now called, it's the belonging is their main theme, developmental, it's beyond, what's the first part of it? It's a study of how do we help churches learn to belong. Because when they come in and study, most of us, rich or poor, that the people on the margins don't feel accepted. We had this grant that was just finished on Church Under the Bridge. The lady did a year-long study on us, 33 interviews, all kinds of issues. Again, we're an outside church with homeless and poor of all kinds, but we were so blessed when she gave us the report how our people with disabilities, I've got 2 mentally ill, severely schizophrenic people in our church. what do you do when somebody's screaming in the middle of a worship service? Well, we love them the best we can, and sometimes they don't act right. They didn't take their medication. I've got a guy who thinks he's Jesus. He really does. He was in jail. Jesus is in jail right now. Oh, actually, I think he's out waiting on he's got a leg monitor. So you got, what do we do with it? Isn't the church supposed to be there? So the problem is, people want to be, so the fun part of our church is we've learned over 33 years how to include people who don't fit in other systems. But it's messy. Every Sunday is messy. There's good and there's bad, and it's challenging. These guys that go here. But I'm convinced part of the challenge, I appreciated what Barbara said, how do we get the church to become the mission agency? Well, you do it that way. You have people that have a place. And it's the music's not going to be as good. We do have Paul and the leftover. We've got Thomas. We had a guy. I'm sorry, I got to hurry on my talk here. I need the day up. So this guy named Patrick showed up one time, African American guy, under the bridge, got out, said something we didn't understand a word he said. He said it 12 times or whatever. We still didn't understand a word he said. And finally, somebody said, I think he's asking, can he be on the worship team? Well, you can't even sing and talk, much less sing. But in Church of the Bridge, you get to be on the worship team if you want to. So he came over and we said, okay, nobody's on the bongos. So we put him on the bongos that day. He banged on them and knocked them off. They went out in the street, and we knew that wasn't going to work. So he showed up the next week, and we decided that we let him just direct music. So he got out in the middle of the stage, and we're up on a trailer stage. And he directed everybody, but then he knocked over two of the music stands, and so that messed up, so that didn't work. The third week we figured it out. We bought him an electric guitar. We just never plugged him in. 12 years Patrick's played the electric guitar, and I mean, he just getting that, and he'll stop in the middle of a song, and he was sign language. Well, he doesn't really sign language, but people. So we had this one lady, the second time he was doing it, with tears in her eyes, say, thank y'all so much for having a deaf ministry. We don't have a deaf ministry. That's just Patrick. So, but he was who we are. Well, he got, in COVID, his house parents died, so he had to move off, and we got a guy named Thomas now, who Paul and our bands know real well, but Thomas is probably about 80 years old at least.
87.
87. He's on stage everywhere. So we bring in outside groups. We have country western, we have hippie, we got every kind of quality band. We're a hip hop guy. We got them all. But Thomas plays the cymbals every Sunday with whoever it is, and I mean he's up here doing it, and then he'll pull it through his legs like this. And he's on the edge of the stage. We're afraid Thomas is going to die at church some Sunday by falling off the stage with his cymbals. But that's who we are. It's like it's the church, isn't that church? But in a theology coming from where I come from, that you keep your people away, your kids away from that kind of stuff. I want to tell you, taking your kids to church in broken areas, they say, well, no, we're protected. Take them to the homeless shelter. Take them with you on your mission trips. My kids grew up going around the world, and so today they're global kids. When we moved in the neighborhood, there was no way to get going. I had a regular job writing grants while Janet was homeschooling the kids. But the children had nowhere to play, so we built a half-court basketball court, and it was so popular, we eventually, when we got enough money, made it into a full court. Mission Waco grew up on a basketball court in my house. They're still playing basketball on my court tonight, and it was a need. And I'm talking about 50 kids sometime, and so King's Club, our children's club, grew up in our house because of that, and my kids learned how to run those groups, and over time, and so those kids are now in their 60s, some of those neighborhood children. But we watched the development, and so we fell in love with the families. Janet got to know the mamas. So I want you to kind of I'm going to run out of time. I'll tell you just as much as I can of some of this stuff. But power's a big deal, because these are powerless people in most cases. If you can't control things, and you feel like you can never beat the system. So do you know the CCDA? How many of you know what CCDA is? There's a national group that called Christian Community Development Association. They were having a conference about 3 years after we moved to the neighborhood, and somebody said, I think they're like you, and that should scare people. So we decided we would go to their conference, and it was like we found our best friends. They'd all relocation, we'll talk about that, moved in, and basically it's how do you do church and community together. And so through the years, that's what happened. So Janet would go to the mamas, knock on the doors in we're talking about terrible housing and all kind of stuff going on, but she got to know everybody. We had everybody's address and names of all the children on our refrigerators and everywhere else, and she would go love them and get to know them. And again, one of the models of community development is you listen. We preacher types need to learn to listen. We got things we want to tell people, but listening, and not just the words, but the feelings behind the words. What does it mean to be poor? To not have lunch for your kid to send to school. To the pothole in your street. When you're poor and you call, and nobody comes. But when you're rich, you call, it gets filled up real quick. These are people who've been beaten up by life in so many ways. They're amazing how they survive some of that. Well, Janet got to sit in their rooms and houses and get to know them. And so there's a cynicism. Well, if you do some of these things, it'll change. Well, it didn't change. So Janet said, she said, well, what do y'all really need? She said, we need security lights because we get broken into in our house and we don't have anything to do. So, well, there's a rule in Texas, in Waco, that if you have so many people sign up on this petition, you get a free street light on your corner or over 2 corners or whatever it was. So she asked, would y'all like to do that? I'm willing to help you. They said yes. So everybody signed their name on the petition, and they went down to the city and put it on the desk of the person they were supposed to. And some of them pretty cynical, said that nothing's going to happen because it never does. And so they gave it to him. They said, well, about 3 weeks from now, we'll put your light in. Well, they waited. 3 weeks became 4, became 5, became 6. And they all said, see, I told you, the systems don't work for us. But you don't know my wife. And she said, well, we'll see what we can do about that. So she grabbed 3 or 4 of them to go with her, and they went back down to the office and where they put the petition. He said, the guy apologized, I'm sorry, we've been busy, and it's here somewhere, we'll get to it. He said, we're not leaving this office until that thing gets signed. And so they stood, learning how to be a resistant force. How do you stand in the face of power in a way that's not angry and mean? But we as Christians want to be nice to everybody. But sometimes change takes being tough, standing up against the broken system. And so they stayed, and he found the form at the bottom of the pile. And about 3 more weeks went by, and all of a sudden they hear the motor of the drill going down to put the light in. And you talk about excitement in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden they begin to make cakes and get refreshments. And as it got dark, the night was now there, they had a party underneath the light when it went on that night. The people found out the people with the power can make changes. So empowerment is our work. There's a lot of difference in empowerment and relief. We are an empowerment-based people, but churches have to be there. Well, you can't do this overnight. It's not like quick mission trips. Let's go help those poor people and give them some stuff. You got to be there. You got to hang out, and you don't have to live. Relocation's one of them, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Self-esteem, you know that already. You got to have that part of it. So, quickly, change can be hard. It requires more than talk. It cannot be forced. You must admit the present failures. That's hard for us. We're proud people. Well, yeah, but we're doing it. We'll keep doing it because it'll work eventually, even when it shouldn't be working. You got to admit alternatives are important. When you get into recovery, these men that are my heroes, and you're struggling with recovery of any kind, you got to admit that you made some messes. You messed it up. Not just I just need to get off the streets because it's killing me. You got to really want to change. It's hard, right, guys? I mean, these are the phases they go through to get to the graduation program. It's hard, but when they you can't force somebody to go through rehab and think it's going to work. Any choice, you really need to let them look around and say, this will work for me this way. So choice is a big deal, and then encouragement. All of us need encouragement. You're going to have days. I learned this the hard way. So many people in recovery do relapse. And you think, we spent all that time and money to get you through recovery, and you went out and got drunk again? Yeah, because relapse sometimes a part of it is recovery. And those of us that are judgers don't realize, hang in there. By the grace of God, they'll return. And so we see the joy of that because we've been doing this. How many people have been, was it 800?
860 was the latest round.
Okay, of how many men have gone through the program, and the recovery rate for our program is higher than the national average. There's a program because it's got the faith piece built into it. Okay, now I'm gonna fly pretty quick here. Not gonna do that. Well, let's see. There's one word. The word holistic. I know that's common language now. This is biblical. do you understand that Christianity started in a Hebraic system? Let me see if I have my, yeah, I do. I'll show it to you a different way. So, anybody read Niebuhr? Go to seminary, you know. Niebuhr's was a theologian, wrote a book in the 50s, Christ and Culture. Basically, there's 5. He has 5 models. I'm squeezed 2 of them together into one because for simplicity. You have some people in Christianity that believe the way you deal with the city, the evil of the city that makes your kids grow up, is Christ against culture. You reject culture. Okay? We have a group in Waco that are kind of like they're Anabaptist background, if you know anything about theology. The Anabaptist theology, but they are, they don't call themselves Anabaptists, but Mennonites, Amish, brethren, come out of that background, okay? Get away from the city, get away from the messes, protect your kids, and they're good people. But that model doesn't work so well in my neighborhood because they can't get out of the city. So they would accept them. They're good people and they're Christian. I worry about sometimes because mainstream Christians judge them because they don't dress the same and they sometimes, based on their methodology, won't have a computer or something. But Christ against culture. On the other side, you have Christ of culture. And this is where Christianity and culture get so mixed up together, you don't know what's Christian or not. I mean, the very issues of wealth and power get so built into Christianity. So, I mean, when's the last time you heard a preacher in a middle-class neighborhood preach against wealth? Oh no, they pay the salaries, they take care of the building. It's one of the major themes of the Scripture. Did you know that? You ever do a Bible study on God's looking at wealth? He's not anti-wealth, but those of us that have been blessed, it is a corrupted side. Go and sell all you have, he told the rich and sell and come and follow me. There's something we need to talk more about, but we just don't have the courage sometimes because it's so wounded up in this mess. So the early church fathers did so. Some of the great Ignatius and others that became Christian and followed because they gave up incredible wealth just to follow Christ. So you got Christ against culture, Christ of culture that blends it together. Just love Jesus and God will bless you kind of mindset. The middle one is Christ above culture. This would be something that most of us here is kind of the transformative model. You live in the culture, but not of the culture. You get in the middle of it, but you don't live like them. There's this balance of, hey, and there's no rules about this is okay, well, you make up rules. But it is one of the things that we in the church don't talk about. How do you really help the poor neighborhoods in your city? You live in the middle of it. Now, incarnation is hard stuff because my father-in-law, who didn't like the fact that his daughter, they came out of wealth, is now in the middle of this messy neighborhood. There's not much way to explain it except that we loved our people. We want to be around them. And my kids grew up with a whole different worldview than the kid that's, and not all rich kids are bad kids because some of them are doing our stuff all the time. So here we go. Holistic, it all goes together. Empowerment, listening to the community, you got to do that. Reconciliation. If your church is not overcoming not only racial barriers, but economic barriers too, does your church look like the kingdom? And how do you make that happen? And is it okay for poor people, if you're in a rich church, to come there, or people that are black come to a white church? These are hard issues. We had the Koreans lead at our church last week. We work real hard at having churches that are multicultural, our church to be multicultural, and leadership that is multicultural as much as possible. Okay, relocation, I mentioned that, redistribution. How do we give back? Because people need to eat. I don't want you to say, well, he said never give poor people anything. No, I didn't say that. But how you do it and relationally, what Paul and Maureen and Lee do is ongoing. How long have you been doing Thankful Thursdays?
About 2 years.
And the homeless, the poor come, and it's got dignity, and they have to deal with hard issues. Okay, lastly, I want to say church-based. This is where the church has met. We didn't want to put that under our system. Young Life did not begin because it was a base of, they began because nobody was reaching the athletes and the kids. Campus Crusade for Christ, people weren't doing it. So many of the strong parachurches, historically, they were Christians, but they didn't fit in the church real well because our base was not broad enough to have this disparate kinds of ways of looking at things. So that's something you got to work out. I'm not going to do Nehemiah don't tell him. This is, okay, Janet and I, by the way, we were ropes course instructors a long time. They don't teach you this in seminary, but when you have somebody, if I go out on a ropes course and I'm doing the high elements, so, and I'll tell them, well, this rope here is so strong, the way it's done, and we throw them away after a few months because your life is in danger if you don't have a good rope. Have on our belay, say, okay, now climb up to the, they're yawning while we're listening to that first one. Now say, now climb up on top of that pole, they call the pamper pole, and with your belay, and stand up on the pamper pole, and really, and so yeah, you're doing that. We got them, there's no way they're gonna fall. They climb up this 30-foot pole, and now they're standing on the top. I mean, their heart's just doing this, and now we're saying, look, jump off the pamper pole onto that trapeze out there in the air. Well, I don't care how much you believe in that rope down here in this boring talk. Now it's your life you care about. And it's so fun to see tough football guys become little girls and cry on top of a pamper pole. But there's all of a sudden we're saying, trust us enough to jump. That's faith of a sort, a model. So most of the time, because our Christianity we play it the safe way, we don't stretch our kids. Going down to the urban centers, working with people who don't look like you, those are even little things. Going around the world is a little better, but there's ways that you can do it in the safety net and help your family, help you get it more. So I want to encourage you to think about that. So this question I won't deal with now. Do you know your city? Do you know who lives where? What the percentages are of cultural diversity? What's the school rate as far as passing? Do you know your city? And unfortunately, we move away from the bad part of town because we don't want to get in the messes. I want my kids to get a good education. My kids went to public school, and they made some bad decisions along the way, but they survived it. And I'm not saying anything bad about Christian schools. I'm just saying if you're a Christian school, you need to work doubly hard to get your kids out of the school to see the city and work among the poor as well, at least others. Okay, I'm not going to do that because of time. We work in Haiti a lot, average $1 a day in Haiti. The poverty is overwhelming. We went there and lived with our kids for not long, 6 months or so. Children are dying because they didn't have clean water. So what do? You figure out how to drill water wells. And so we got a water well drilling machine, and we learned how to do that. The Haitians learned how to do it for us. We learned water purification. One of the best things that Janet does is this whole concept of do you know Grameen Bank? How many of you have heard of the Grameen Bank? Anybody? So the Grameen Bank, Mohammed Yunus won a Nobel Peace Prize. He is I think the temporary president of Bangladesh. Does anybody know for sure? They had a crisis, and I think he stepped in at one point. I don't know if he's still there. Yunus would teach his economic class to his college students in Bangladesh. And so you've got to help the poor. You've got to help them get access to money. The loan sharks rip them off. Then there's no banking system for them. If you make just a little bit of money, then the loan shark comes and said, I'll give you $5 now so you can do what you need to do, but it's going to cost you $25 in 2 months. So the systems are evil and broken. So Yunus said, created this particular model. You go into the village, you have a process of interviewing the women. They don't work with the men because they found out that if you work with a man and he gets more money, he gets a second wife and more liquor. So that didn't work real well. So they stay with the women. There's a criteria of how many people they'll take, and they go through classes. And it's Christian based. We stole his program. Didn't stole it. We added a Bible study to the program we did. So through the years, we've had hundreds of women, Janet does in Haiti and other places, go through the training to learn how to do a job. And then we're talking about a person that's making $1 a day, now at the end of the program with their job makes $4 a day. You think that's 4 times more than they were making. So many, many women, and it's a great program. So we learn how to do those we sponsor kids in school because school sponsorship is one of the best ways. To a quick sidebar, we have a homeless shelter at Mission Waco, and they come down on Friday with Paul and others. We've been doing this program for a long time to celebrate birthdays sometimes, sing, and do things with them. These are street guys. One day I went in, Janet was doing the annual sponsorship deal, and it wasn't real expensive back then, but went in one day and they said, I said, guys, or guys and girls, I'm sorry to embarrass you if this offends you, but I said, we have 2 or 3 kids that still can't get sponsored to go to Haiti school, so they get a meal every day and get books and tuition paid. And would y'all be interested in sponsoring a child? All their hands went up. I couldn't believe it. They wanted it, said yes. And so, and it was something like $110 back then. And so they did it. They started bringing back a quarter, extra dollar, and every Friday morning they would put their money in the little slot there. In about 6 months, they sponsored their first child in Haiti, the homeless in Waco. And then they said, we want another one. And there are 2 now. Paul just gave Janet $25 more for this last week. That's empowerment. I may be homeless, but I got dignity. I'm helping kids that are poorer than me go to school. So building systems that work like that. Okay, gotta quit talking so much, don't I? Is that all I have on that one? Okay. All right, now let me do, I think that's all on this particular slide. So when I have questions, Christian community development is hard, but it's so meaningful. But you can't do it quickly. That's the problem. We want quick fix ministries, and you're not going to see real change. If you tell the guy on the corner, you give him $1, he's going to tell you what you want to hear. That doesn't mean change. And so learning how to understand the principles that he talks about, I want to encourage you to do that. There is a weekend that I'd like to tell you about, written about it, but I'm not going to give you the book, and I'll tell you why. Now there's 3 books here. Let's see if I can get Helping Turners. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I had a youth director call me. I don't know where he did, it doesn't matter. I had a youth director call me one time. We hadn't been in the neighborhood more than a year. Oklahoma City, youth director, rich kids, Bible church kids, smart as a whip, knew their Bible backwards and forwards. He says, these kids know their Bible, but they are so self-centered and they don't love people, anybody that doesn't look like them. Can you create some way to challenge that? So we didn't know what we were doing. We figured it out. So we said, okay, bring them to Waco. So they came, I think 27 of them showed up. We didn't even have a building. We did it on our front porch. And we did our first poverty simulation. It matured through the years. We've been doing that we've had over 15,000 people go through the weekend. I've had 27 millionaires go through that weekend. So you come to Waco, and for that weekend, now there's a lot of educational things out there like Planned Famine. I love what they're doing. Their statistics are amazing. But watching a video for 3 or 4 hours and talking about it and then going to McDonald's at the end of that doesn't really change behavior. So having been the roast course in person, we understand systemic change. How do you get to the processing side where you got to lose it for a while. So it's a 42-hour weekend, and they would come in, and I'm not going to tell you all the details because I want you to come to Waco to do this, but I will tell you the basics. So you pay money. Used to, you only had to pay $25. You got to pay $95 now to be poor in Waco. What a deal for all of us. So you come in, and there's we start in the 8th grade. You have to have a certain amount of abstract thinking. Kids can make it through it, and then we let your parents bring kids if you want to, but it really is not as easy if they don't come. But basically, you get the amount of money of a welfare family for that weekend. Based on the number of hours you're going to be there, it's 42 hours. You get that much money, and then all weekend long, you have to make choices that are real choices because now you don't have any money. We take everything away from you except for 4 things. It's always interesting to see what 4 things people keep. Do you get to keep your toothbrush or not? Do you want a sleeping bag? Because you're probably going to be outside one night. It's the real early, the first, and it's kind of fun. Especially if you've got a youth group, they're all kind of giddy and stuff. Well, it's fun for a little while, then it's not so fun. And so most of them will choose to spend the night out, the first night on the backyard. So we have this big building now where they do all this. And during the night, they don't sleep well, of course. And sometimes it rains, and we love how God's humor is sometimes that makes them suffer. And then, oh, by the way, before that, they go to the thrift store and they get used to is a lot better because we dressed up nice, and then you wear poor clothes out of the lottery thing that we have for clothing. now kids dress that way, so it's not as much fun. But so they spend the night out mostly. Not you can pay to get in. You get so much money. That's what you want to do with it. You have to decide if you want breakfast in the morning or not. So you pay for that. I'm not going to get into the food thing too much because it's part of the deal. And basically, for 42 hours, we kind of control your life if you're playing the game. And then you go, you're on the streets for a period of time. It's safe. We've never had anybody hurt all these years the way we do it. And this is 8th grade on up. We have, during that time, we do a global piece. We have them sit in different parts of the world. If you've taken perspectives class, we used to do one of these things like that. But basically, you draw the straw, and based on where you draw it, you're going to be in India or Haiti or India, all these different places in the United States. So while the Indians are eating rice and curry with their hands, and the Americans eating steak and baked potato over here, you begin to feel it. And now this is 24 hours later. Because I'm hungry now. I've been on the streets and we didn't get to eat today, or we ate, but we ate something out of the dumpster, or we ate something that we all found enough money to buy something in the convenience store. By the way, one of the things they did discover, usually this is common, they found out that churches didn't help them much, but poor people did. It's real ironic. And you talk about transformative. All of a sudden, the homeless guy shares half his sandwich with you. And you see things. The church that had food that they closed it. No, I'm sorry. And they don't look homeless, but they obviously are poor, and we tell them not to tell they're homeless. But it is really powerful to see the circumstances that are transformative when they're out there on that time. So they're back. We have the banquet. A lot of processing going on during the time. There's a couple of videos they see that are really meaningful. And then most of them, at least one of the 2 nights, will end up. Oh, by the way, they do have a separate drawing. We have a separate drawing for the homeless. 1 out of 10 of the group becomes homeless. You don't get, the others get 4 items: sleeping bag, toothbrush, whatever you can. Those 10 don't get anything, not even a sleeping bag. So then you find out who your real friends are. Do you want to share a toothbrush with somebody or not? Do you want to sleep on a sleeping bag on the, or will they give you one of their tickets to get a 4? They get 3 and you get 1 now because you get a sleeping bag. Very interesting dynamics. A lot of things going on at the same time. And then the next morning, by Saturday night, they get it. There's a real beginning of change over time we see. And then the next morning, get up, debrief as much as can. They come to church in the Ridge, and then they come back, and there's a whole debrief process. But I say that because that's the way you learn. Me coming to your church and talking about poverty doesn't change your behavior. So we that are cognitive oriented have got to start facing the fact this is not the way Jesus trained. It's not just dumping information, but we have this idea that if I do a good enough Bible study or whatever, then you will, and it does help. But when it helps is when you've gone through some of the struggle, when you're in a place where you're in a leper slum and you pray differently than you do there. So all that to say, we've been doing that a long time, and we'd love to have you consider going. I'm retired from Mission Waco. We created it and ran it for years, but missionwaco.org, you can look it up and see there's usually it's 6 or 7 times a year, and you can bring groups if you want to. Okay? Now I'm gonna hush. What time are we supposed to get out of here? 3:45. I got 15 minutes. Let me try to answer questions if you have any. My hope here is that you understand change is important. So the neighborhood where I live now doesn't look like the old neighborhood that we live in. It's a nice neighborhood. My house is big. The bar across the street, we did let the Pentecostal church rent it out one time. They were louder than the bar people, so we didn't run them off. And then the girls aren't in the streets anymore. Some of them became Christians. Down the street where Mission Waco's main places are, there was a shopping center that had been boarded up by the city. It had been the liquor store, the porno theater, and another bar, and there was a beauty shop. And then across the street was another bar, the liquor store, actually. So that was the corner. I mean, just to go down there was life-threatening. And so one day we'd pray. We'd drive by this boarded-up building, 4 buildings in it, actually, and say, God, give us the courage. And so finally, one day I stopped and found the owner, because he wasn't ever there because he just paid taxes. And I said, would you make us a deal? We're a poor, small Christian organization. We'd love to do some things with this stuff. He said, oh, no, here, signed the deed and handed it to me. Now, I thought, what? And because he was just paying taxes. Nobody was going to come down there. We start taking the boards off. Water comes pouring out of the rooms. And I mean, it was a disastrous area. First thing we did was get the neighborhood people to help us. The people with the problem, what? Must be a part of the solution to the problem. This is your neighborhood. What would you like us to see? So we began to work on those. We eventually put our offices down there when they got finished. We have a cafe now called the World Cup Cafe. We have a fair trade program in the back of that. We have the theater that is now, it was called the Capri, the Dirty Theater, is now, we call it the whole center Jubilee Center, so it's Jubilee Theater. And if you know anything about, let me tell you a quick story, I love this one. We didn't have any money to have a theater. We had a lot of Baylor kids that volunteered. We loved, and some of them had some theater background. So when we finally got the theater put back together, we made it into a stage theater instead of a film theater. And so they start working with the kids and teach them things about acting and character things in theater. And so we loved it. And so I'm a Little League baseball kind of kid. I didn't know a thing about theater. But all of a sudden that kid was acting up in the school, is now in the front of the theater. He knows how to act. It's amazing to see how the arts were helpful. We were real affirming of the arts for part of the transformative stuff. We have ballet, we have music, all those things are part of Mission Waco now. Well, eventually we got the theater done. The kid named Stevie Walker Webb came. He was an African American kid, poor in the neighborhood, came to the children's program. We have 60 kids every day, 40 teenagers every day. Well, he was one of those 60. He'd come and go through the theater stuff. And then he got into high school, still didn't have enough money for leadership, but he loved it. He loved theater. So at the end of that, he called me and said, will you help me go to college? I want to get a degree in art and theater. I said, no. I said, we can help you with the junior college a little bit. We had a program for that, but we can't send you there. He said, I just really want to feel it. Because I found somebody that said, okay, I'll help him go to North Texas. They have a good theater program. So he majored in sociology and fine arts, and this knucklehead kid finished with flying colors at North Texas 4 years later. He called me, he said, hey, I really love what I get to do. He used theater as a mouthpiece for transformative justice, and said, would you help me get my master's? And I said, I'd love to, but we can't do that. That's way out of our league. I said, but I will hire you to be our first theater director. Stevie Walker Webb came back to Waco, Texas, and became the theater director of the Jubilee Theater. Amazing. We had neighborhood plays. We did Fences, the Broadway play with neighborhood people. He'd do art programs with the kids. Just an amazing kid. And we still do all those things. But then he called me at the end of 3 years and he said, well, I have some more bad news probably for you, but not for me. He said, the best drama school in the nation is in New York City, called the New Drama School, great school. And he said, but they only had 3 scholarships and 1,200 people applied, and I got one of those. A neighborhood kid, a knucklehead little neighborhood kid, goes to New York City and gets in their program, graduates. He had to work as well his own job while he was there. Janet challenges me because my memory about how many years, of course, we're so old. 5, 6 years ago, Stevie Walker Webb directed a play on Broadway. You know how fun it is to be old and watch the transformation that happens over the years with some of these, but you gotta be there. And he now is, I think it's Baltimore, he's the art director for all of Baltimore. And we've, not just him, and there's other kids. Now, some of them don't do so well. We go see some in Joe Parrish stole the TV out of our program 3 times. I was one of those suckers. He'd come over and say, can I borrow your lawnmower to mow the yard across the street? And I said, no, because you stole my last lawnmower. I'm not going to do that. And then I'd feel guilty. Okay, so I'd go up and make him a peanut butter jelly sandwich while he's mowing. And then I'd come out, and he'd already be gone to the pawn shop to sell that lawnmower. So, it's not all pretty, but that's just life. It's just the way you do it together. And so the model of community development for us has been transformative. So church that is accepting and a neighborhood social ministries where we all come together for the same is very good. So what do you want to ask? Got a couple of minutes here. I went on too long. How many, okay, go ahead. You were about to say something.
Jimmy, how did you get, was it
just the guidance of the Holy Spirit give you the vision for all this? Like, how did that all?
No, I'll answer it in a very secular way. You just do the next thing. You don't go away and so the people, if they think, first thing we did was have a guy get a job. He needed a job. There was no Google back then. We figured out how to do it. The next thing was they got the crack all over the neighborhood, and they're not going to take poor people. So we had to figure out how to help him get in a unit. So if you're listening to the neighborhood, the Holy Spirit speaks through that, and you just keep doing what you're doing. So there's 26 programs and 14 buildings or something like that, 85 staff now, but it's because we're there 47 years. So don't get overwhelmed when you come see this stuff. Just do the first thing and do it well and keep doing it and watch it bear fruit over time. And you'll make some decisions to change some stuff, but we think the model that's much more, I think, again, the Holy Spirit's in all this. Yes, sir.
I know it's a little bit too early for me because I'm just not starting all this, but tonight, who do I need to, when I get back into
Yeah.
being a social member of society?
Yeah.
I'm still
Yep.
a student right now. What do I need to, who do I,
The fun part of being,
who do I need to donate to?
all right, well, ideally, the nest of Mission Waco, because you're in that church, is there'd be if you fill out a resume, our people put their resume and they can put whatever they want to, they get rejected 10 times. Who's going to tell you didn't finish high school, you were into drugs, but we know you, we watch you, we've seen your, so the best is when we can figure out a way to hire you or be a part of a part-time or let you interview as a volunteer. The system needs to reach down and help you get out the next few steps. That's the best. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. Manor House, you have to move into the third phase, you have to have a job. But it's a net. We have a separate house to live in, still have accountability while you're there. And
I understand, I'm talking about once I get to working and having steady income, who do I need to donate?
I'd say, to donate money to?
Yes, sir.
Me. I'm sorry. That was. I should have.
Yeah, see, that was good.
I should have answered that fast earlier the first time. But no, put it back into where you've seen it work. Put it back into Manor House. Put it back in the neighborhood. We being in a church on a bridge. We'd like to thank all of you Texans for building our building with your tax dollars. We thank you very much. It didn't cost us. Do you know how much money you have as a church when you don't have to do buildings? I don't take much we have a little deal that somebody gives me because I'm a pastor down there, but our budget is pitiful. But we give away money globally. We work in Haiti, Mexico, and India, and a lot of that's through just the church. And so, but they get to be part of it. When you know that the guys in Mexico City that are our friends are getting blessed, so find in the middle of all the stuff that's going on where your heart is. To support the homeless in Mexico City that are coming out of recovery. That's missions. Doesn't look the same way we talk about missions, but that's what that is. So there's a lot of ways that we can help do that. A couple minutes more? Yes, sir.
Speaking from the nonprofit side, what was your connection with other local churches, and how did you develop that relationship with the local churches, and then continue to cultivate that?
Okay. The good news again, I went to Waco in 1968, and I'm still there. So you get to connect. Lynn over here, a wealthy First Baptist church, incredibly supportive of what we do. So it comes out of natural relationships over time. We feed our people every Sunday morning. Their church comes down regularly. They want to find a way to work, and they know that people are not ready to move downtown to live, but they do know that they appreciate what we do. So these connections happen in amazing ways, and that's, again, when you don't have to have a lot of money to survive and whatever's given, then you have ministry opportunities. So you just keep doing it, but don't blame. Now, there's a lot of people may not want to work with us. They have their own little program or whatever they want to do. So we're not judging them. We just have found through the years that God always seems to provide. We're ethical in our money. We do everything right. We have outside audits at Mission Waco. We make sure everything that's given there's accountability for it. So we think beyond reproach, Christian missionaries, nonprofits, 501(c), you got to find a way to let people know you're ethical, and because that's part of the kingdom. Because there's nothing worse than somebody runs off with the money, and that happens all the time. Good question. Last question. Yep, 3 minutes. 3.5 minutes.
Kind of to answer his question, you build relationships.
Yeah, it's all about relationships.
That relationship, when they see you're faithful and you build trust,
Yep.
So Jimmy, having been sitting at the table at the banquet, you shame us into it.
I don't want to do that.
I mean, you do.
No, I want you to have the joy. I love our life. I love my kids, love Jesus. I have a son that's a pastor in Galveston. They did this kind of work for 10 years down there. We've seen the fruit over time of the blessings of it. And it's not that everything's perfect, but you can't, you start where you are. If you're old, you can't go back and be where we were. You can't go around the world yet. But there's just something about where you'll see fruit pretty quick and joy.
And I don't say that critically, but you have to make those of us who live in the suburbs
Yeah. Yes.
aware
Yes.
of what we're not seeing.
Yeah, and we have to be invited, and some people, I've gone to First Baptist Woodway lots of years and speak to here's the process for us. I can tell my story when I go to the adult Sunday school class at Woodway, and it's just my story. You can't disagree with my story, because that's what we chose. You may think it's stupid, but that's what we did. But then I say, they'll ask a question. I'll say, well, would you be interested in doing what we call our Other Side of Waco tour? We have a van, we have the whole deal on poverty. We explain some of the stuff I did here. And yeah, that'd be fun. Because they haven't ever seen the part towns that we work in. And they've seen the buildings. And so we get it for an hour and a half with this little bit. We drive around the poor parts of town. And I'd say more than half, their eyes bright up. They really begin to see, I didn't even know this was in Waco. I didn't know this story. We talk about housing. I mean, we got the data to show what Waco's situation is. And gentrification is killing us now. We were always a poor city. We could buy houses cheap, and now the rich are moving in because of the Magnolia not just because of Magnolia. We love those. Chip and Joe are friends. But all of a sudden, what we thought was all good, because now the buildings are pretty and the crappy hotels are torn down, my people are on the streets. There's no place to get into because they could pay $800 a month. They can't pay $1,200 a month. So now we're building tiny homes for the homeless. And so there's just, you have to morph. But basically that trip, some of them get off and say, what can we do next? Well, I'm not ready to put them in the deep end. But I said, well, we do have children's programs all over town in the poor apartment complexes. Would you make refreshments or go with us to Vacation Bible School? Just come with us. All you need to do. And they do. So I'd say out of 20 that in that Sunday school class, you may end up with 5 that really get it and are ongoing with you. But don't take that as defeat. That's success. And our problem is we want everybody to love my story and do what I want you to do. That's not going to happen. So don't get too zealous about who stays with you. So. One last question? Yes.
Not a question, but.
Oh, I should explain who you are.
Yeah, not a question, but I work over at Mission Waco, so. But when I look at Mission Waco's programs, we have so many different things, and they're so diverse. And one of the things that, has been in the organization because of Jimmy and Janet, it's just find the need and fill it. And the needs it'll be clear. And the needs will change.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. But it's going back to listening what the community actually needs. And thinking about that and just Jimmy and Janet they don't wait for other people to do it. They say, okay, we know what the need is, let's figure out how to do it. And it's been the history of Mission Waco, and it's worked. Once you start getting into a pattern of, okay, we filled this need, we filled this need, and then you start having the confidence that, okay, God's going to take care of us. God's going to fill out whatever we need. He's going to figure out what building we need. He's gonna figure out that number and that staff that we need to figure out. And so, yeah, it's just, it's an incredible thing to kind of see just how kind of God works.
And I think that the time, again, people are mobile. Not many people stick around very long to anywhere. They move on to another thing. So we're not real smart. We just didn't go away. You know, and that really is probably the fruit of being around a long time, knowing the names, loving the kids, people. So that's not something you can be sure of, but somebody has got to be stable in the middle of these ongoing ministries that we keep the need doing. Okay, there's more, but I want to say thank you, and I'd like to pray for you. We will, if you're in the middle of something, we will more than gladly consult you and help you and connect with you. And these are tough issues. I didn't show you I'm not here to sell books, but I'll sell books. So the last book I got to do was called Commonwealth, and this is all the pictures. This is Jesse. He's my friend Jesse. We have a cafe. We had a grocery store because we were in a food desert, and we had to close it up a few months ago. But at 9 years, because people had to walk over 2 miles to get to a grocery store. So listening to the neighborhood, that's what they wanted. There's a story behind that I won't get to. But anyway, so Jesse was in the store, and I took his picture. This book is about some of what I just told you, and there's a lot of the stories. And one day I was walking into Sam's Club, and this guy, white guy, was a Salvation Army guy, ringing a bell. You know, they get paid a little bit for that. And so the book had just come out, and he said, "Hey, why you got that black guy's picture on your book?" Well, I said, "Because he's my friend, and I like it. And he comes to the store, and I got to know him." He said, "He shot me." I said, "What?" He pulled up his shirt, and he had a hole right there. So I probably shouldn't have told you that at the end, should I? That's probably the wrong timing. And Jesse denies it, by the way, so we're not sure if it's really true or not, but that's what he said. But Jesse, I still love this guy. He's been a real good friend. So, Lord, thank you for the fun of the kingdom. Thank you for brothers and sisters who care about your world. Thanks for a missions conference where we get to think outside the box and implore your heart for the city. God, we know you love the city, you love the people. Thank you for Christians that are struggling to understand and want to know how to follow obediently. God, so we just say thank you and ask you to lead us next in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy.